Good morning. 11 days ago, it was April 10th, I just checked the date, I did a recording talking about a Rubik's Cube. And I broke the cube. This was all properly organized, and I disorganized it. And I'm now going to give you an update, a report on my progress in solving the cube. And I think the thing what's really interesting me about the cube at this moment is the idea that it's a kind of a metaphor for how I'm dealing with my life at this time. I feel like I've got a lot of things that I really care about that I feel like I want to complete. I want to have a feeling of completion. And at the same time, um, well, not at the same time, I always have craved order. And so the idea of having everything back in place is really wonderful. At the same time, the reality is complicated. Life is like this unsolved cube. It's all over the place. So there's that to think about. And so I am addressing it and thinking about it and wondering, and I am also working with Erno. I I've read the book. I've read the audio book um, two times all the way through, and then I've listened to chapter 3 at least one additional time, maybe two times more. Um, and what I'm thinking is, it would be, I thought this when I finished the book, it would be very interesting to revisit the experience that he had the first time he solved the cube. So I'm not doing any research in terms of looking for solutions online and things like that, books. Um, I'm more interested in trying to discover the cube kind of the way Erno did. I do think that with all of the time that I've spent reading and looking at the cube, and this is an official, by the way, trademarked Rubik cube, we're on a first name basis. That's what I think. So here's what Erno says. When I was faced that first time with the challenge of making some sense out of the confusion of colors, I realized I needed to be absolutely aware of what seemed to be small insights, the nuances. That the middle cubes do not move, for instance, may seem like a trivial discovery, but when everything is turning around an axis, it's useful to see a point of stability. And that was something that actually yesterday I was fiddling with the cube. I was thinking about what's going on inside, and then I was realizing, oh, you've got there is this structure inside. Well, think of it, white tends to be thought of as north. So the I've got a north-south axis here, and then I've got an east-west here and another east-west here. These are all solid. These are axles in a way, and everything else turns around them. And so that that's something new that I'm thinking about as I approach it. So there's that. And then looking at here, he talks the corners. When attempting to solve the cube, I never thought about it in terms of algorithms. I simply paid attention to only a few pieces and ignored what was going on with all the others. I followed my instincts. I thought with my hands. I used the full force of my intuition as I worked the corners. I figured out how to liberate pieces I had blocked and to manage the frustration of having pieces I thought were in the correct position turn out not to be oriented properly. At first, I put 4 corners in their correct place. skipping a little bit. If you start with a white side, as most people tend to do, the corner pieces are white on their top and their sides match the colors of the neighboring middles in the middle layer. I established the top layer. So I'm thinking about that, working on that, and the next phase of solving my very first cube was to place the remaining four corners correctly in the opposite bottom layer. So that's what I'm going to be trying to do. I'm going to try to get the top layer, and I'll work white. Here's this will be the white, and so get the white set up, and then I'll be working on yellow. Remember, you've got that solid one, that north-south axis is solid. So white is always on top, yellow is always on the other end of it there. So I'm sharing that. And one other thing, as I was re-listening to the book, I was very struck by something he said. Um, and I think this is something that is, this is important. A decade or so ago in the United States, there was an effort to reform the teaching of science. This resulted in what became known first as STEM, to cover four scientific fields: science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or my preference, STEAM, which would also include the arts. And wow, what a great observation, because the whole business of science also involves intuition. It also involves the exploring, and when you're a certain amount of playing around. You try things out and see if they work. Um, and so there is this whole layer of, yes, I understand the rules, and yet at the same time, I want to see how they apply under certain circumstances, or what happens when you bring another material, or you place it in a different structure or in a different environment. There's so much that can happen. And that idea of building a creative kind of, let's, arts, what is the difference between, back when I was in school, there was a whole thing, what's the difference between art and craft? And a craft is a lot like science. If you're a great potter, for example, you have developed technique that you can use uh, to build your pot, and then you're applying science. You're putting chemicals on the outside of it that are going to be the glaze. You're going to put it into a furnace where you're going to bake it. How hot is it going to be? There's a ton of science that goes into all of this. Okay, so here's a craft that involves science. What is the distance between science and art? And wouldn't it be a good thing for scientists to have a little art in their background? And artists, artists actually are always working with science. Painters are dealing with well, potters is a better example. So that's right now. I've spent 11 days and I haven't gotten anywhere. And but I'm thinking about it.